my name is Mitch Simoens. I do work for Sencha. I am often called that forum guy. So if you ask questions, a lot of them, I'm in touch quite a bit on the forums. I try to help you, do what I can. You can contact me, Mitch@Sencha.com. It's pretty easy. I'm on Twitter all the time. Him and I used to instant message quite often. And of course, LinkedIn. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth in the code like Jay did. I'm more going to talk about the chapters that I helped write for Sencha Touch, which I only got 3. Jay wanted more money. So the 3 chapters I have, chapter 3, 7, and 9. 3 is over the foundations of it. It's kind of some of the inner workings of it that's important to know. You may not dig too much deep if you're just starting off on Sencha Touch, but it's crucial to know how the code works. The 7th one, chapter 7, so it goes over the data stores and the views, like data view, list, nested list, stuff like that. And then of course 9 is maps, media meaning audio, video, the image class. So chapter 3, what I meant by foundations is there's a component model, which is, this component extends another component, which extends, it's the inheritance. And you got the life cycle, the whole life of a component from creating it to destroying it. And then we'll see a couple ways how to create components. So there is the components model on the right side. I know it's hard to see it. It's in the book. It's the same image that's in there. You can just see the whole structure of all the component models. It's very extensible. It gives you dependability, meaning so component extends to abstract component. So whatever is in abstract component, you can rely on component having that same logic. It gives you some performance. If you shouldn't use panel all the time, sometimes you just use a container. The life cycle, it's great to think of the life cycle just like you and I. We're born, we live, and unfortunately we die. Same with the component. You create it, instantiation, it's born. You render it, it's living now. You can make actions on it, you can interact with things. And destruction, it's dead, it's gone. Go bury it. Instantiation, there's 2 main types, there's direct and lazy. Direct, you can use ext.create and use the class name. You can also use the new keyword for some of us old folks. Or lazy instantiation, which is just an object using that X type that Jay mentioned, the nickname of it. And that is great if you're not within like a method. You're using like a property, like items equals to an array with an object. And once that parent class gets instantiated, it'll create this because it needs it instantiated now. So it's lazy that way. It's not going to use memory until it needs to. So that was chapter 3. Yeah. Chapter 7, the data views and the views. This is one of the more popular components. This is the list. You get data from a server, you have to display it somehow. So in this chapter we talk about on a data store, the model, proxy, reader, writer, how all those classes, how they work together. Of course we go through the data view, list, and nested list, and we'll expand on this right now. The data store. It's good to think of a store. It's just like if you're a database person. You have databases, you have tables, and tables have rows of records. So a store is good to think about like a table. It holds rows of records. And a model, an instance of a model is a record. The model is like the schema of a table. It's going to be the actual row of it. Then you got the proxy, that's just the means of it. Is it an AJAX? Is it going to load from local storage, or maybe REST, or direct, or ext.direct? The reader is responsible for taking that raw data that's coming from the server or from local storage and parsing that into JavaScript. Is a JSON, so we're going to decode that JSON into regular JavaScript. And a writer, that's kind of mixed in there at all times. It's going to do like, if you're going to create a record like locally, you're going to sync that back to the server so that the server can go ahead and create it in a database or do whatever. Well, the writer is responsible for handling that request or adding the data into that request going back to the server. You can also do things like batching. So if you create 5 records, it's not going to send 5 requests. You can batch that into one, saving so much of that bandwidth that some of these carriers don't have. I have Sprint, I have 3G, it doesn't go anywhere. So data view is the simplest ways to view that data that came back from the server. You use an X template to display that. We walk through what an X template is, how do you use it, some of the more advanced features of an X template. You can use regular JavaScript within it. You can use the template method within it. I mean, you can really get pretty advanced with it. Had a question?
Yeah, so Sencha define its own MVC model?
Yes. Yes, and we actually, the last application that Jay writes, we actually walk through how to create, or how to use the MVC, how to set up a controller and stuff like that. The data view, like I said, it's a simple visual representation of that data. It has a one-to-one, so one-to-one relationship with a record between and a element. So if you have a record, it's going to have that element within the DOM. If you have 100 records in the store, you're going to have 100 rows in the DOM. And you can also use components within it. So if you wanted like a form field and stuff like that, you can do that. Just be cautious of performance because you got all that DOM in there now.
Does it have paging?
No. That will be in the list. It has a list paging plugin that Sencha Touch has. So the list, it extends data view. So like we said in the component model, you can rely on some of the same code from the data view. But it brings extra features. So you get the grouping, you get index bar, you get disclosure, the icons. And, I'll show you both a simple and advanced list in the book. In a little bit, I'll show you some examples of this. The list can be infinite. So in 2.0, we came out with the list, and people were trying to shove just massive amounts of data in it, and performance was really crappy. It kind of goes off of what Jay was saying. DOM, the performance, if you have a large DOM, that's your performance hit. JavaScript runs fast. You're always going to hit that DOM limit on that first. So in 2.1, we introduced this concept of an infinite list. So you can have as many records in the store as you want, and it's just going to perform the same. If you have 10 records, or if you have 10,000 records, it's going to perform the same. There is a difference between 2.1 and 2.2. 2.1, every list was infinite. Some people didn't want that though. So in 2.2, by default, it is not infinite. There's an infinite config to make that list infinite. So it's an opt-in feature now. Of course, if you're having an infinite list, there's no one-to-one relationship between record and DOM element. So it's going to reuse the DOM elements. So you're going to have a lot better performance. If you have like 50 records even, I would use infinite. Because you don't know if you're going to have an iOS phone or an Android phone. They behave so differently now. The nested list it's kind of hard to explain. So what it's really going to do is it's going to take a tree structure. So if you think of like a Windows Explorer where you have like folders with nested within each other. Well, the tree structure doesn't really work on a mobile device. So we use the card layout within the framework, and we have these child lists. So if you click on a node that has children in it, it's going to animate another list in, so you can step into it. And the nested list also allows you to have a detail card. So if you're on, let's just say a file, and you want to see details of the file, what MIME type is it, how big is it, stuff like that. You can use a detail card, and all that functionality is built in. The back button at the top, so you can step back. All that logic is already handled in the framework. It tries to make it easy for you to use. Moving on to chapter 9. Let's do a little demo of that list.
Yeah.
So this is a plain list. We have grouping headers up here with this light blue. We have an index bar here, so click on it and you can kind of see the group headers go from B to G to S. It's the only ones because we're the authors. So right now I have a store with 100 items. You know, you can scroll through it. Scrolls pretty well, right? Well, we can add, let's just do 500. Now we got 500. And still, not right click, it still performs quite well. So let's kick it up to, let's do 10,000. Now we have 10,000 items. And it's still scrolling quite well. So you can see we had start off. So we started off with 100 records in the store, and we moved up to 10,000, and performance was the same. That is what the infinite list is for.
Can you run Sencha Touch in a browser, or do you go over to EXP.js? And how similar is Sencha to EXP.js?
So that's kind of a loaded question. So I'm in Chrome right now, just because it's in development, where I'm kind of in a development environment right now. You know, I'm looking at things. So, and it's WebKit, so it's going to work the same on an iOS, you know, on mobile Safari, on Chrome with a stock browser on Android. XJS is really geared towards applications that you know are going to be on a computer. So you can rely on that mouse so you can click. You know, on a finger on this, we have to allow, you know, a finger, I don't know, that could be 10 pixels, I have no clue. I haven't measured it, I can measure it. But, so it's kind of two different beasts. One's for a desktop browser, one's for mobile. Now, the differences of them, the feel of how to use the class system and everything like that is going to feel the same. There are some little API differences. The config system in Sencha Touch is heavily used, which Jace, you saw an example of that with the config. XJS doesn't really use it, but pretty much the feel of the two frameworks are going to be the same. And if you're going to SenchaCon, we actually have a little announcement to make in that regards of how similar they are. We're going to make that simple for you, basically.
But you can run Sencha Touch in a web browser perfectly as well.
Definitely. It's WebKit, yes. We are, or Internet Explorer 10, yes. Firefox, no, not yet. In Touch 2.2, we do have some experimental Firefox OS support in there.
Safari also.
Yes, that's WebKit, yes. Okay, so that is the infinite list. So moving on, chapter 9. A lot of times with apps, we're in a lot of corporate environments. You know, it's very data driven. But you don't have to just be that. You can break out of the box, I guess. You can add some video to it. You can add a map. You know, if you want an about section of your app, and you want to show where's my office at, throw a map in there. It could be Google or Bing in 2.2. Because, you know, of course, if you're on a Windows phone, you have to use Bing Maps, not Google. We do provide a image wrapper, exe.image. It does some nice things. It allows you to either use an image element, or you can save some performance, and by default, it just uses CSS background URL. So you're losing one element in there. There are some differences in there for sizing issues. That's why I try to make sure people know that by default, it's just a div with background URL. Or if you use the mode config, it goes into an image element. And of course, audio, video, it's HTML5. You know, it's nothing special that Sencha Touch is doing. We're just putting pretty much a wrapper around it. So map, it's a simple wrapper. You know, you're not going to be able to. There's not like an API within Sencha Touch to add markers yet. That's more of a, well, it's debatable whether or not it's application specific thing, or if the framework should have it. not hard to put it in there if you need it for your application. It's really simple. We do provide to use geolocation, the HTML5 geolocation API. So if you're walking around, it'll auto update and you can track yourself on the map. Image, I pretty much already said that, got ahead of myself. It is something on the forums that I do see a lot, is why is my image disappearing? Well, it's because you didn't give it a size. So background URL, if that div doesn't have a size, that image doesn't have a size now. An audio video, like I said, it wraps the HTML5, it's just audio video. It's a wrapper around that audio video element tag in the DOM. We do bubble up some of the DOM events. So when you start playing a video, well, the component level is going to get that play event. Likewise, there's some methods that you're probably always going to use, maybe with a audio or video. You're going to play it, pause it, create a little iTunes, a mobile iTunes if you wanted to. But don't go crazy with these things. Performance with these tags is very heavy. If you're loading in a video and it downloaded that, that's in memory. So if you're going to have, say, 5 videos on a page, well, how much memory are you going to be using there? So one thing that we try to do to help you with performance, especially if you're having like a panel and you're scrolling the panel and you have a couple different videos in it, we show a poster image. So we're not actually putting that video into the DOM yet. Once you tap on that poster image, then we remove that poster image out and we throw that video in there. So it tries to help you with performance, but you have to think you are in a mobile device. You don't have 8 gigs of memory. And also codecs. So on a desktop, you can install a codec. If you need Real Player, you can install the Real Player codec. Mobile device, you really don't have that. I have a lot of success for video, like MP4. There is some OGG, some of the different codecs in there that are supported in the different devices. I think the MP4 is the most widely one that I've seen.
So can you embed a YouTube video? So it looks like.
The way they really work it, they want you to use an iframe. And since Sencha Touch uses its own scroller, then we capture those events. So you can't really interact with things within an iframe well currently. In the future that may change.
It can't support streaming video either, can it? From a URL, it has to actually be something that's local.
Right.
Do you know if there's any support? There's planned support for that?
It's really up to HTML5. We're just wrapping these things. We don't want to,
Because with iframes, you get some weird, like cross. You get weird areas about where the content's coming from and where the request started from. And the word is slipping my mind. When you use it on Android and iPhone.
Right.
So the video tag is fantastic if you have the actual file there. But most of the time, like you just said, you don't want to have the file in memory. So you would put out a request when you hit play to start pulling in this stuff. So that'd be really convenient.
Well, in HTML5, it does have an attribute that you can set or you can control when it starts downloading it. So when that element is actually created, you can load that file, or you can load it as soon as you play it. So it could be created, but not load the file. So you can kind of control it a little bit.
So an S3 will work with this?
Yes.
I think the attribute is preload or something like that.
Right. Okay, so that's actually it for my 3 chapters.
Can you talk about the carousel?
Sure, what do you want to know?
I saw it said like infinite carousel. Is that infinite image carousel? Is that what that is?
What was that?
It was on the list of components
Oh,
per
okay.
slide. And I was just wondering if how that handles paging of the images, with drawing them down and
So the infinite carousel is actually a private component right now. But the carousel in Touch 2, it does some fun things in there. Say you have 10 items within a carousel. It's only going to render 3 of them at a time by default.
Okay.
And so you save performance. Now, using infinite, yeah, you still have to handle that yourself. You can extend the carousel, and you can add and remove things or stuff like that.
Is it only horizontal or does it do
You can do vertical.
And I assume it has the carousel behavior where you can like click on the image and then go somewhere else, or not?
What do you mean click on the image?
Well, in carousels like in a newspaper article or something, click on the image, takes you to somewhere.
Okay. So that's not really part of the carousel. Carousel is basically just managing the drag events and swiping back and forth, up and down. But with the framework, yeah, you can capture that tap on that image, that either that component or that element, then handle that yourself. Yes.
Plans.
Any other questions? Did I make you fall asleep too? No? You didn't have to stare at a lot of code, did you? I mean, you get this image, but... Okay, well, that's all I have.